When a man loves you, his emotions may not always show up in ways that feel obvious or traditional. Love can manifest as distance, and while that might seem counterintuitive, it's a reality rooted in how men process deep emotions. Many men are conditioned from a young age to suppress their feelings, to view vulnerability as a weakness, and to solve problems on their own. When love enters the picture, it challenges those learned behaviors. It's not that he doesn't care. It's that he cares so much, he feels the need to retreat and understand what those feelings mean for him and for you. Men often need time to reflect because love introduces complexities that can feel overwhelming. It's not just about attraction or admiration. Love requires self-reflection. They might ask themselves, am I ready for this? Can I meet her expectations? Will I be enough? And sometimes to answer these questions, they create emotional or physical space, not to push you away, but to come back with clarity and purpose. This distance is also a way for them to maintain a sense of control. Love can be destabilizing, it's powerful, raw, and it changes a man's focus and priorities. For someone who may not have fully understood the depth of their feelings before, it's a moment of reckoning. Ignoring you in this sense isn't a rejection. It's often a sign that he's grappling with the profound impact you've had on his life. It's crucial to remember that men process emotions differently. While women often feel a need to connect and share, men may feel the opposite. They retreat to process privately. This isn't about shutting you out. It's about understanding how they fit into the relationship and how they can show up for you in the right way. Sometimes their silence is their way of finding the right words or actions that will match the love they feel. This behavior doesn't mean you should tolerate consistent neglect or emotional unavailability, but it does mean that sometimes the space he creates is not a wall, it's a bridge he's building in his own way. It's recognizing this nuance can help you find patience in those moments of uncertainty, knowing that love doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it's quiet, reflective, and deep. It's his way of saying, I'm figuring out how to love you the best I can. When a man loves you, he may sometimes ignore you because he is dealing with internal fears and insecurities. Love can be a transformative and overwhelming emotion, one that forces him to confront parts of himself he might not be ready to face. For many men, the depth of genuine love can trigger thoughts like, what if I fail her? What if I'm not enough? These fears can manifest as avoidance, not because he doesn't care, but because he cares so deeply that he doesn't want to make mistakes. Men often struggle with the pressure of being providers, protectors, and pillars of strength. These societal expectations weigh heavily on them, especially when they're in love. They want to give you everything, but the fear of falling short can cause them to withdraw. Ignoring you in this context becomes a coping mechanism. It's not about you, it's about their inner battle with self-worth and whether they feel capable of being the partner you deserve. Another layer to this is vulnerability. Love exposes a man's heart in ways that can be deeply uncomfortable. For someone who has learned to guard their emotions, falling in love feels like losing control. Ignoring you is often an attempt to regain a sense of composure, a way to avoid showing vulnerability until he feels secure enough to express it. This doesn't mean he's cold or uncaring. It's his way of navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. In these moments, patience and understanding can go a long way, but it's equally important to establish boundaries and ensure you're not left feeling neglected or unimportant. Love should never come at the expense of your emotional well-being. While his behavior might stem from his struggles, it's crucial for him to communicate eventually and let you into his world. What's most important is recognizing that this behavior often stems from fear, not lack of love. His silence might be his way of saying, I'm scared of losing you, so I'm trying to figure out how to do this right. Over time, as he grows more comfortable and confident, those walls can come down. True love is about finding that balance between giving each other space to process emotions and coming together to build something strong and lasting. When a man loves you, he might ignore you because he's trying to process his emotions and figure out the depth of what he's feeling. Love is not always a straightforward experience, especially for someone who isn't accustomed to expressing their emotions openly. For many men, emotions like love are uncharted territory. They may not know how to navigate this new world without stepping back to evaluate how it fits into their life. Ignoring you might seem counterintuitive, but it's often his way of finding clarity amid emotional chaos. Men often internalize their struggles and prefer to process things alone. It's not about excluding you or keeping secrets. It's about wanting to show up in the best way possible. By stepping away temporarily, he's trying to make sense of the overwhelming feelings that come with love. He's asking himself questions like, what does this mean for me? Am I ready for this level of commitment? Can I meet our expectations? These are not small considerations, and they can lead to moments of withdrawal. Additionally, societal norms have long conditioned men to equate strength with silence. Expressing emotions or leaning on someone for emotional support is often seen as weakness, even though it's not. So when he ignores you, it may come from a place of trying to maintain the image of independence and control he believes he needs to uphold. He's not rejecting, he's wrestling with the vulnerability that love brings to the surface. Another factor is the fear of overwhelming you. Men sometimes believe that if they share everything they're feeling, it might burden their partner or make them seem overly dependent. They don't want to appear like they're losing their footing, especially in the early stages of love. By ignoring you, they're buying time to sort things out internally so they can come back with a clear mind and a sense of stability. It's important to understand that this period of distance doesn't diminish the value of his feelings for you. On the contrary, it often highlights how seriously he takes the relationship. If he didn't care, he wouldn't bother reflecting on how to approach it. However, as much as his processing time is valid, communication is essential. You deserve to feel valued and included, even as he works through his emotions. In these situations, patience is key. Sometimes it's about giving him the space he needs while gently encouraging open communication. Let him know you're there to listen without judgment. This reassurance can make it easier for him to lower his defenses and let you in. Over time, as he becomes more comfortable with his emotions in the relationship, he will likely learn to process his feelings in a way that doesn't require withdrawing. Ultimately, love is about growth both individually and together. By understanding his need for space and supporting him as he navigates his feelings, you're building a foundation of trust and respect. At the same time, it's important to ensure that the balance is maintained and that his actions don't leave you feeling disconnected or undervalued. When a man loves you and begins to ignore you, it might be because he's testing the boundaries of his emotions and figuring out how to reconcile them with the reality of the relationship. Love can be overwhelming, especially when it's deep and consuming. Sometimes the way a man processes this intensity is by pulling back, not because he wants distance from you, but because he's unsure of how to move forward without losing himself in the process. Men are often cautious when they feel vulnerable. Vulnerability is not a state they've been taught to embrace and love. By its very nature, exposes a person's deepest emotions and fears. When he ignores you, he might be subconsciously protecting himself from the fear of rejection or disappointment. He may think, what if I'm not enough for her? What if I mess this up? These questions don't arise from a lack of love, but from a profound sense of care and a fear of not measuring up. At times, this withdrawal is his way of regaining control. Love has a way of disrupting routines and reshaping priorities, and for someone used to independence, this shift can feel disorienting. By stepping back, he's attempting to restore a sense of balance, not because he doesn't value you, but because he wants to approach the relationship from a place of stability. He wants to make sure he's contributing to your life in a meaningful way without losing sight of his own goals and identity. Additionally, his silence may reflect his desire to understand your role in his life more deeply. When he loves you, the stakes are high. He knows that the choices he makes now can shape your shared future, and that awareness brings a weight of responsibility. By taking time to think, he's acknowledging how much you mean to him and ensuring he's making decisions that honor that significance. It's also possible that he's working through past experiences that have left him hesitant to fully engage. Love doesn't erase old wounds, and sometimes those scars resurface when a man begins to care deeply about someone. He might be asking himself if he's ready to trust again or if he's equipped to offer the kind of love you deserve. His ignoring you isn't about punishing you, it's about protecting both of you from potential heartache. And in moments like these, it's crucial to avoid jumping to conclusions. His silence doesn't necessarily mean he's pulling away permanently. Instead, it's often a reflection of the internal work he's doing to align his emotions with his actions. Patience and understanding go a long way. By showing him that you're willing to stand by him without pressuring him, you create an environment where he feels safe to open up. Over time, as he becomes more comfortable with his emotions and learns to navigate them in healthier ways, his need to ignore you will likely diminish. He'll recognize that his love for you doesn't have to come at the expense of his independence or sense of control. It's a process of growth, both for him and for the relationship. What matters is that you both remain committed to finding ways to connect, even when the path isn't immediately clear. When a man truly loves you but seems to ignore you, it may be because he is overwhelmed by the depth of his emotions and unsure how to express them. Love has a way of opening up vulnerabilities that many men aren't comfortable confronting. For some, the safest response to these feelings is to retreat, to create distance while they process the intensity of what they're experiencing. It's not a rejection of you, but a sign that he's wrestling with emotions that are new and perhaps even frightening for him. Men often face societal expectations that discourage them from being open about their feelings. They're taught to be stoic, to be problem solvers, and to suppress emotions rather than embrace them. When love enters the equation, it disrupts this pattern, and many men don't have the tools to navigate this shift. Ignoring you may be his way of trying to regain a sense of control over his inner world, not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't know how to show it without feeling exposed. In moments like this, it's important to understand that his silence is not always a reflection of how he feels about you. Instead, it can be a reflection of his struggle to reconcile his emotions with his understanding of himself. He may be asking questions internally, such as, am I capable of being the man she needs me to be? Am I ready to handle the responsibility that comes with loving someone so deeply? These questions can weigh heavily on him, leading him to withdraw as he searches for answers. And another layer to his behavior could be fear of failure, fear of losing you, or even fear of letting you see his imperfections. When a man loves deeply, the stakes feel incredibly high. He may believe that stepping back is a way to protect the relationship, to avoid saying or doing something that could jeopardize what you share. In his mind, silence can sometimes seem like a safer option than risking vulnerability. It's also worth considering that his retreat might stem from a desire to give you space to show how you feel. Men sometimes test the waters in subtle ways, pulling back to see if you'll lean in. It's not a game, but a way of seeking reassurance that their love is reciprocated. He might be wondering, does she value me as much as I value her? Will she fight for me the way I'd fight for her? His actions, while confusing, often come from a place of wanting to feel secure in your connection. The key to navigating this situation lies in patience and open communication. Resist the urge to react out of frustration or insecurity. Instead, create an environment where he feels safe to express what's on his mind. Let him know that you're there for him, not to fix his feelings, but to support him as he works through them. Sometimes, just knowing that you're not judging him for his silence can be enough to help him open up. Over time, as he grows more comfortable with the depth of his emotions, he'll likely find healthier ways to communicate and connect. Love is a journey of growth, and these moments of confusion and distance are often opportunities to strengthen your bond. What matters most is that you both remain committed to understanding each other and building a foundation of trust and mutual respect. In the end, his love for you will shine through, even in the moments when it feels hardest to see. When a man loves you, he might ignore you because he's processing something deeper than the surface level interactions. It's often easy to assume that ignoring you means he's losing interest, but in reality, he could be deeply reflective about his own internal struggles and perhaps questioning how he can be the man you deserve. His silence might be his way of finding clarity in the relationship, unsure of how to voice what he's experiencing without making things more complicated. At times, the emotional depth of love can overwhelm him. For many men, love doesn't come with a clear roadmap. It's something they've never been taught to navigate with ease. The idea of truly committing can bring up fear, uncertainty, and doubt about his readiness to be vulnerable. In those moments, when the heart and the mind are at odds, the instinct might be to pull back, to pause, and to shut down for a while. Another factor could be that he wants to protect you from his own confusion. If he doesn't have the words or the understanding of his emotions, his instinct might be to distance himself rather than risk saying the wrong thing or doing something that could hurt you. He might fear that in his emotional turmoil, he could unintentionally push you away, and in a twisted way, silence feels safer than risking damage to something he cherishes. Additionally, he could be testing the relationship, silently asking himself if you will still be there for him even in his silence. This is often less about you and more about him needing to know if he's valuable to you without needing constant validation. In this silence, he might not realize it, but he's seeking reassurance. Not reassurance through words, but through your actions and your patience. While his silence can seem like a cold shoulder, it's important to remember that it's often not about you at all. It's about his own journey with love, self-doubt, and vulnerability. If you meet this silence with patience and understanding and not with frustration or anger, he will begin to feel safer in sharing what's really going on inside. It's about giving him the space to open up on his own terms, knowing that you're there, unwavering in your support. Ultimately, if he truly loves you, this temporary distance will pass as he works through his own emotions and finds a way to reconnect. It's not a sign of loss, but an indication of the complexities of love and how deeply he feels for you. The key is to be patient, communicate openly, and trust that love in all its forms will eventually find its voice. When a man loves you, he might ignore you because he's afraid of overwhelming you with his emotions. Men are often taught to suppress their feelings, to remain stoic and in control, but when love is involved, the intensity of those feelings can become too much to manage. He may feel vulnerable, and this vulnerability can cause him to pull away, not because he doesn't care, but because he's unsure how to express the depth of his emotions without making you feel burdened or pressured. This fear of overwhelming you comes from a place of wanting to protect you. He doesn't want his emotional chaos to disrupt your peace. So in moments when his feelings are too raw or complicated, he retreats. In his mind, giving you space, even at the cost of seeming distant, feels like the more respectful option. He might believe that if he's too open or too intense, he'll be a burden, that his love could suffocate rather than support you. In these moments of emotional retreat, it's crucial to understand that his silence isn't a rejection of you, but rather a way for him to process everything that he's feeling. Men often don't know how to communicate the overwhelming emotions of love and affection without sounding insecure or needy. They might even question their worthiness of the relationship, which only intensifies their desire to pull back rather than risk being vulnerable. What's important here is to recognize that his ignoring you isn't a sign of love fading, it's a sign of emotional complexity. He may be feeling overwhelmed, unsure of how to articulate his feelings, and most importantly, trying to avoid the potential of making you feel uncomfortable. Instead of assuming that his silence is something personal, it's crucial to see it for what it is, a defense mechanism, a temporary retreat as he sorts through his emotions. If you can meet this silence with understanding and patience, you're giving him the space he needs to work through his feelings. Recognizing the fear behind the action allows you to respond in a way that reinforces trust, love, and patience. And when the time is right, he'll come back more ready to share and connect. When a man loves you, he may ignore you because he is trying to figure out how to maintain his independence within the relationship. Men are often wired to value their freedom. And when they enter a relationship, they sometimes struggle to balance their need for personal space with the emotional demands of love. And in his mind, maintaining that sense of self of being an individual with his own goals, desires, and passions can feel threatened by the closeness that love demands. This doesn't mean that he loves you any less. On the contrary, it's often a sign of respect for you in the relationship. He might fear that if he gives too much of himself, he could lose the parts of him that make him who he is. He may retreat, hoping to preserve his individuality while still nurturing the connection with you. It's not about withdrawing his affection, but rather about safeguarding a sense of autonomy. For men, especially in the early stages of a relationship, balancing love and independence can be a delicate dance. When they feel overwhelmed by the thought of losing themselves, their response might be to take a step back. The silence isn't a rejection of you, it's his way of recalibrating, figuring out how to give love without compromising who he is at his core. If you understand this dynamic, it becomes easier to see through the distance and into the heart of the situation. It's about recognizing that his need for space isn't about you, it's about him finding his balance between being in love and staying true to himself. With patience and understanding, he will find a way to reconnect, but he needs that time to process his feelings and keep his identity intact. And when he returns, he'll be better able to give to you in a way that's sustainable and fulfilling for both of you. When a man loves you, he may ignore you because he's afraid of being vulnerable. Many men, especially those who've been hurt in the past, carry emotional scars that make them hesitant to fully open up. Vulnerability can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a doorway to deeper connection, but on the other, it exposes us to the risk of emotional harm. For some men, the fear of being hurt again is enough to make them pull back when they feel the relationship becoming too intense. You see, men are often raised in environments where emotional strength is valued above emotional expression. From a young age, they're taught to suppress their feelings and be stoic. As a result, they grow up believing that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness. When they fall in love, they might feel a deep emotional pull, but that pull brings with it the anxiety of what it might mean to let their guard down. The fear of being emotionally exposed can lead them to shut off, even though deep down they still care. What this looks like in practice is a sudden withdrawal or a quiet distance. They may act distant or less communicative, not because they don't love you, but because they don't know how to express their feelings without feeling exposed. Their silence might feel like a rejection, but it's more likely a defense mechanism. When a man loves you, but he's afraid of being vulnerable, he may unintentionally push you away in order to protect himself from the emotional risks that love inherently brings. This fear isn't something that can be easily fixed, and it's not something that can be forced away by pressure. In fact, pushing a man who's afraid of vulnerability can often have the opposite effect, making him retreat even further. What he needs is patience and understanding. You need to create a space where he feels safe enough to lower his defenses on his own terms, where he can see that his vulnerability will be met with compassion rather than judgment or rejection. In these moments, it's essential to give him the space he needs, but also gently encourage emotional honesty. Let him know that you're there for him, that you're not going anywhere, and that you value the parts of him he's afraid to show. Over time, as he sees that you're not a threat, that you won't use his vulnerability against him, he'll start to feel more comfortable opening up. But remember, this is the process and it takes time. Just as you would with someone who's learning to trust again, give him room to grow into this aspect of the relationship. As much as you want him to open up and express himself, know that it's a journey that requires trust. His hesitation isn't a reflection of his feelings for you. It's a reflection of his own internal struggles with vulnerability. It's about helping him navigate through his fears and showing him that love can be a safe place. In doing so, you'll build a stronger, more connected relationship where both of you feel seen, heard, and supported. And when he finally does open up, you'll understand that it wasn't a matter of not loving you. It was a matter of learning how to love himself in the process. When a man loves you, but seems to ignore you, it could be because he's overwhelmed by the complexity of his feelings. Love is often seen as a beautiful and fulfilling experience, but for many men, it's also a challenge that pushes them to confront their fears, insecurities, and unresolved past experiences. Men often carry heavy emotional baggage, and when they fall deeply in love, it can trigger these fears, making them feel both excited and terrified at the same time. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff. There's beauty in the view, but also a deep sense of vulnerability. What happens in these situations is that the emotional weight of love starts to feel like a pressure that he doesn't know how to handle. When he's ignoring you, it's not because he doesn't care or that his feelings have changed as often, because he's unsure of how to navigate those feelings. Men who love deeply but fear intimacy may retreat to process their emotions on their own simply because they don't know how to deal with the vulnerability that love requires. The rawness of love can feel like an overwhelming flood of emotions that they don't know how to control. In these instances, it's important to understand that love isn't always smooth sailing. The emotional complexities that come with it can be difficult for anyone to process. When a man is ignoring you because he feels overwhelmed by the intensity of his feelings, he may be trying to regain control over his emotional state. It's a defense mechanism. He's trying to create space for himself so that he doesn't drown in his own emotions. Love brings him to a point where he's forced to confront himself, to confront the parts of him that he might have hidden for years. And when those parts of him are triggered, the instinct to shut down or pull away is strong. But this doesn't mean he doesn't want the relationship. It doesn't mean he's losing interest. In fact, it could be the opposite. His fear of being consumed by love makes him retreat. He may love you so deeply that he's afraid of being consumed or becoming too vulnerable. This fear often has its roots in past experiences, perhaps from previous relationships where they felt betrayed, hurt, or abandoned. When a man has been through emotional wounds in the past, they often carry that trauma with them. These scars can create walls around their hearts, and when they fall in love again, they struggle to let those walls down. At this point, what a man needs most is not pressure, but understanding. He needs time to process his emotions and work through his fears. The fear of being vulnerable in love often stems from past trauma or previous heartbreaks that made them question their ability to truly open up. When love comes into the picture, it feels like a test that could either heal those wounds or expose them further. The last thing he wants is to be hurt again. So the tendency to retreat becomes a coping mechanism. If you find yourself in this situation, the key is to not take his distance personally. It's important to give him the space to confront his emotions on his own terms. Let him know that you're there for him without being pushy or demanding. Create a safe environment where he feels free to express himself when he's ready. Sometimes just knowing that you're not going anywhere, that you're not going to judge him for his vulnerability, can be enough to bring him back to you. In these moments, patience is a powerful tool. It's not about pushing him to talk or forcing him to open up. It's about providing the support and security he needs to work through his emotions at his own pace. When a man loves you but retreats because of the overwhelming nature of his feelings, what he truly needs is to feel emotionally safe. He needs reassurance that no matter what, you will still be there when he's ready to fully open up. Eventually, when the emotional weight becomes manageable, he will come back. He'll start to feel comfortable enough to share those emotions that once felt so heavy. And when he does, you'll see the depth of his love, not just in his words, but in the vulnerability he's willing to share with you. The important thing is to remember that his withdrawal isn't a rejection of you. It's a sign of his own internal struggle. It's a challenge he has to face on his own. And all you can do is be patient, understanding, and supportive. In doing so, you'll create a strong foundation of trust that will allow him to be emotionally available when he's ready. This process, though difficult, will ultimately strengthen your bond, as it will be built on the understanding that love isn't always straightforward. It's a journey that requires both partners to meet each other where they are, allowing for growth, healing, and mutual support.